to order. Before I get started, I just wanted to note that we have 3 board members that are not here this evening. Director DeSalvo and Director Hayes will not be attending this evening, and Director Mayfield is not here, but he may be coming later. So we'll go ahead and get started. Director Gosa, would you please read our board priorities for us?
Priorities. The Davenport School Board establishes the following priorities to ensure the academic success of all students. Provide leadership and direction to improve the overall learning environment in our classrooms, schools, and district, including the health, safety, security, and happiness of students and staff. Direct and support actions, programs, and activities which reduce the impacts of poverty on our students, their families, and our community.
Thank you very much. Director Potts, would you mind reading our mission and vision statements, please?
The mission statement: to enhance each student's abilities by providing a quality education enriched by our diverse community. The vision statement: education that challenges conventional thinking, prepares all students to compete in a global society, and inspires our students, parents, staff, and community to answer the question, what if?
Thank you very much. Superintendent Kabilski, are there any student board reports?
We'll turn things over to our student representatives.
So at Central, we are wrapping up our student hunger drive, and we concluded it with a student versus teacher volleyball game today to get a couple more donations.
Something that's been big at Central recently is our MVP program, which is Mentors in Violence Prevention. The upperclassmen, or I guess sophomore through seniors, have been going into freshman advisories and just talking about some of the issues that aren't covered in normal school curriculum. And it's going really well so far.
So not much has happened at West in the past meeting. We're actually starting our student hunger drive this week by doing Spirit Week to raise money for it. So yeah, that's it.
All right, thank you very much. Move on to board reports. Are there any? Director Potts.
I attended the band spectacular a week or so ago, and it was spectacular. The highlight of it really was the University of Iowa band was there, and that was a real treat. That was a spectacular, it's rather redundant, isn't it? It was a really good performance. And our high school bands did extremely well, and the junior high school bands did very well. So if you haven't ever been, it's something to see, because you've got 4,000 or 5,000 parents and kids in the stands. It's an amazing evening.
Thank you. Director Beck.
I also popped into the band spectacular and got to see the middle school bands, which was really cool. It was also very cold all of a sudden that night. I remember that as well. I also wanted to say that we had a successful school board candidate forum here last week. KWQC hosted and also live streamed the event, and I believe it's archived on their Facebook page. I think it was really informative. It seemed to go really well and very smoothly. We had 13 of the 14 candidates here to answer questions. And if you are interested, like I said, I believe it's housed on the KWQC Facebook page. It's also on our website, excuse me. I forgot that part, in case you want to catch up on it.
Thank you. Any other reports? All right, then we'll move on to communications. Director Beck, would you please read those upcoming events?
Yes. November 4th, Monday at 5:30 p.m., we have a committee of the whole meeting here in the ASC Jim Hester Boardroom at 1702 Main Street. November 5th is Tuesday, Election Day. You can vote early, but Election Day is the last time to vote. Make sure you get out and do that. November 11th is a holiday, Veterans Day, and the district is closed. November 12th, Tuesday at 6 p.m. is our regular meeting here in the ASC Jim Hester Boardroom. And November 25th at 6 p.m. is our annual and organizational meeting in the ASC Jim Hester Boardroom, where we will be seating new board members and organizing for the next year.
Thank you. Next is open forum. Open forum is a time for members of the community to give input at a board meeting regarding school district issues or concerns. Individuals who want to speak should fill out an open forum request and give it to the board secretary prior to open forum. The board will not act on any issue presented during open forum if it was not published as an agenda item. The Iowa Open Meetings Law prohibits action on any issue that is not on the agenda. The president will set the amount of time allowed for individuals to speak during open forum. The board asks that no charges or complaints be made against individual employees of the district or community during open forum. Remarks that reflect negatively on the character or motives of any person will be called out of order. We have five open forum requests, and so when you come up to the microphone, give us your name and address, and you will have 2 minutes to speak. And we'll go in this order. We'll start with Carrie Graham, Hamid Mays, Triana McAllister, Jackie Diekman, Diane Sandman. So we'll start with Carrie.
Hello. Oh. Hi. I'm Carrie Graham. I live at 3606 North Marquette Street in Davenport. I have 3 kids, a senior at North High School. She's in dual enrollment, a sophomore at North High School, and then a 5th grader at Adams. I'm here to talk about block scheduling again. So I spent some time between the last board meeting that we had open forum and this time, and I sent some emails to the coaches and teachers that my kids interact with. And I got some feedback from them because they're the ones this affects. It affects me as a parent because I feel it's best for my child or children. But the teachers and the students are the ones that have to live with this decision. So the feedback that I got was I heard some good things mostly, and then I heard some, how it could be swayed the other way, the decision that was made. But both of my high schoolers play golf and are on the golf team, and when they have meets, a lot of times they leave quite early. Their tee times are early in the day. Right now, they typically miss maybe 1 or 2 classes, which is easy for them to make up the missed schoolwork with the block schedule, because it does allow extra time at the end. So what they missed the previous day, they can typically make up. With 7 periods, they might miss 3 or 4 classes and not have time to make up that work during class time, which could add a little additional stress. Extracurriculars really do keep the kids engaged, at least my kids. I don't know about everybody else's. As far as making sure that they have something, I have to get good grades so that I can continue to be on the team. I can play in the next meet. I can do the next things. I know for the coaches, their feedback to me was that they typically try to schedule their free time, the work time, their prep period, I guess they call it, at the end of the day, so that they don't have to find other teachers to fill in for the classes that they would typically need to. So I don't know where those other teachers come from, if they come from within the building or if they have to get a sub to come in, and then we're paying for substitutes where we wouldn't otherwise be doing so. I'm not really sure the logistics on that, but it just seems logical that that would be a thing. The additional passing
Hey,
time
hey,
was
Carrie,
discussed.
Carrie,
Uh-huh.
excuse me. 2 minutes goes really fast. You'll
It
have to
does.
kind of wrap it up. Okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll just throw in the additional passing time. It would add about 15 minutes to each school day, which ends up to be about 45 hours at the end of the school year. That's a lot of additional time that the kids are in school driving back and forth, which also keeps them from going to after-school activities. So my focus tonight is really about extracurriculars. We want something to toot our horn about. And last week when we had this, question and answer, everybody was talking about how Davenport has a PR problem. Well, eliminating all of these things and making kids ineligible for sports, that's not going to help our PR problem. So, thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. Next is Hamid Mays.
Hello, my name is Hamid Mays, 2724 LeClaire Street, Davenport. A week ago was a tragic day for me and my family. My son was basically kidnapped and lured out of Garfield Elementary School. For 3 stressful and enduring days, I had no idea where my son was. I have a letter I would like to share, please. On Monday, October 21st, the mother of Tyrus Mays, that's my son, entered the Garfield Elementary office and identified herself as the mother of Tyrus. She was given a visitor sticker to join him at lunch. She walked to the cafeteria, sat with him during lunch, but did not return to the office. Instead, she took Tyrus out a side door of the building without checking him out of the office. When he did not return from the office, his teacher notified me. This is the principal letter. I then called his father to ask if he was aware that Tyrus' mother had come to eat lunch with him and take him out of the school. He indicated he had no idea. His father then called 911, as I did. A police officer came to the school to get more information and viewed the camera footage showing Tyrus' mother removing him from the school. And then says, please let me know if you have any additional questions. She was now on the contact or emergency visiting list. My question is, what is the protocol for your visiting policy? I beg you and urge you to review your visiting policy so that this doesn't happen to any other family. I don't have any money to afford a family lawyer, and hopefully this doesn't happen to anyone else. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Hamid. Next is Triana McAllister.
Hi, my name is Triana McAllister. I reside at 4102 Greenway Drive, Davenport, Iowa. I'm here about block versus traditional. My son is Creative Arts Academy student. Because of that, he was not able to take algebra in 8th grade. He carries a 4.0. He's headed for the engineering track, so math is definitely up there in the requirements. So this year, fortunately, he was able to double up on math, taking algebra and then geometry. That's under the block schedule. Under a traditional schedule, that would not have been possible because algebra is a requirement, pre-requirement requisite for geometry. So that would have slid him further behind. So any prereqs, a block schedule is helpful for that because the first semester they can take the prereq, second semester they can take the other class that follows. SPED kids, students, their hardest thing is transitioning. If you're transitioning 4 blocks versus 7 periods, you have a lot of more transitioning time for them to have to resettle in and get their work done. Plus you're going from 90 minutes to 45 minutes. By the time everyone gets in the class, gets situated, gets their materials out, The teacher teaches, it's time to go. And there's not a lot of time for those students to get extra help. Whereas with a 90-minute block, there's extra time. There's extra time for the non-sped students that might be quick at doing their work to get their work done so that they can, like she said, do their extra activities, extracurricular activities, band, marching band, show choir. My son's in marching band, show choir, bowling, tennis. Straight A student. So for us, we feel that block is definitely the better way to go. Engineering. There are classes at West. He's a student at Central. He's Creative Arts Academy, so that goes to Central. He would need to travel to West for some of his engineering classes. With a block schedule, there's time to do that. With traditional schedule, he'd no sooner drive over there and he'd be driving back.
Triana, you'll have to wrap it up.
Okay. And then I guess the last thing would be like when kids are busy and there's less transitioning, there's less altercations. Most of the time, I can't speak for every school, every time, but most of the time altercations happen before school, after school, and traveling between classes. So that would take that aspect and shorten it also. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Triana. Next is Jackie Diekman.
Hello, my name's Jackie Diekman. I'm at 2255 Cromwell Circle, Davenport. I have a sophomore at Central and an 8th grader at Sudlow. I wished my kids could come here, and I had other kids that wanted to speak, but they were at show choir. So very active and very busy, marching band too, and all the other activities. So I think that's why you might not see as many adults, because they're hauling kids, which is what I will be doing in a little bit. With the 7 classes of a traditional, you have 7 versus really 8, because with the 4 classes, you have an additional class, which allows kids that need to maybe retake a class, retake that class. With only the 7, they don't have that opportunity. A lot of times people are like, well, you're with 90 minutes with the same teacher. How can you sit? Well, I think we're doing a disservice to our students. How many of them go to a movie that's over 90 minutes? How many of them can sit on a video game for hours? Sitting in a class 90 minutes, having some lecture, and having time to work with the teacher instead of struggling at home is more important than 7 classes, which then they have more to worry about, again, with finals, etc. Also, with the 8 classes, they are able to do what we call BOC, band, orchestra, and choir. With the traditional, they will have to give that up because, again, there's only 7 classes, and when you are using the basic core, you don't have that choice of doing that additional class. Sometimes people think, well, you're going to have that delay because you might have a class Spanish 3, and then you have to wait a whole year to get to Spanish 4. Most classes have a very extensive review, so there shouldn't be an issue with that. And again, if you know what you're doing on there, a quick review or whatever is going to be helpful. And again, you have that extra time with the teacher. The teacher does not have 7 classes, 7 students, right? So you have 7 times 30 versus 4 times 30. So they have less students, they have more one-on-one, being able to help these kids that if they do struggle to get caught up, that they have the time to catch up with those students. It has also shown that the students are able to retain the information better because they are in the classroom, they are with the teacher asking questions and not sitting at home trying to figure out homework. And I know my kids, if they don't know what they're doing, they just kind of don't do it. So you're constantly saying what's going on.
Hey, Jackie.
Mm-hmm.
You'll need to wrap it up.
Yep.
Thanks.
Well, That's, I guess, what I was trying to hit some of the other points that the other speakers have not done. And I think it's really important to realize that our priorities, as you read in the beginning of this meeting, are not being addressed when you go from a block, which is very beneficial for students and teachers and parents alike, to go to something else. If you look at your priorities, it's again giving the kids that education that they require. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. And next is Diane Sandman.
Hi, I'm Diane Salmon. I reside at 2510 West 69th Street. My son is a sophomore at North, and he's doing very well, but he has such anxiety about the idea of 7 blocks that it physically makes him sick to think about it. He has a few medical conditions to where he has missed school, and having the block time, he has been able to go in, make that up. His grades have remained good, and he is good with how he has to do it. But when he thinks about having 7 classes, and if he misses even a day, having 7 classes worth of stuff to make up, it makes him even sicker because he just thinks about that. He can't focus on what he needs to. My other concern is he came home twice last week and he's like, Mom, there was another fight in the hallway. With 7 classes, there's more passing time. That's more time for kids to be stressed, not only in the hallways, but from their worrying about how many classes they have, if they can maintain their grade point average. And so I'm really hoping that they stay with the block schedule so that the kids have time to do their work, to get the extra help they need, and to not be so overwhelmed with what's going on, because our goal is to have them do well, graduate, go on to college, and be productive members of society. But if they're stressed out, they're not focused on what they need to do, and that takes away from everything that we're supposed to be doing for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane, and thank you, all of you. Thank you, Carrie. Hamid, I think, left. Triana, Jackie, and Diane. It's really important that you do bring these things to the board table and to the community and talk about these things. The board does hear what you're saying, and it processes all of that in its decision making. So thank you, and continue to advocate for your positions. Let me see here. Yep. Next is the consent agenda. May I have a motion?
Mr. President,
Director Beck.
I move that the board approve the consent agenda as written.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Director Gosa.
I'm going to abstain from this vote. There is someone listed on here that I'm not okay with voting on. I brought it up the last time, so I'm just going to abstain. I'm not voting on it.
Okay. When it comes round time, I'll still ask for your vote, and you'll say that you're abstaining. Is there any other discussion? Okay, we'll call for the vote. Director Beck.
Yes.
Director Potts.
Yes.
Director Gosa.
Abstain.
And my vote is yes. Motion carries. Thank you. May I have a motion regarding approval of bills?
Mr. President,
Director Beck.
I move that the board approve the recommendation by the administration for the adoption of the bills from the bill listing periods of 10/10/19 through 10/23/19. Resolved, all claims presented to the board having been duly certified as correct by the secretary, excuse me, reviewed by the administration and board members, and they are hereby audited and allowed as just claims and warrants drawn on the Treasury for the several amounts. Further resolved, the payment of claims and salaries be approved as presented for the periods of 10/10/19 through 10/23/19.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Okay, we'll call for the vote. Director Beck,
Yes.
Director Potts,
Yes.
Director Gosa,
Yes.
and my vote is yes. Motion carries. Thank you. Superintendent report.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to see all of you here this evening. As I am quickly approaching the 100-day mark as my superintendency, I wanted to offer a few observations publicly as I prepare my 100-day report, which I will be offering to the Board of Education very soon. But there were some pieces that I wanted to put out publicly and some thanks that I wanted to get out right away. And I'll do that in the form of observations. First and foremost, I've made the rounds of the district and seen all of our buildings in operation. And what I'm seeing across all employee groups from our administration, from our teachers, from our custodians, from our food service workers, from our secretaries, everyone within this organization that I have come in contact with takes great pride in their work. And I think that's very important for this community to hear. I don't see anyone that is approaching their work here as a job. I think everyone in this district approaches their work as a passion and being part of a noble profession. And I commend them all for doing that. Not only are they proud of the work that they do, but they're extremely diligent and hardworking individuals. I've never walked into any school or any office where someone was just taking a breather or taking a break. I know we have many employees who are skipping lunches because there's just work for them to be done. I know we have teachers that are filling in for other colleagues on their prep period. Everyone is really, rolling up their sleeves to put their best foot forward and give all they can, not only to this organization, but obviously to the education of our children. And I'm very grateful for that. The other theme that I'm noticing as I visit the buildings and talk to all our employees is there's a sincere desire this year to look forward. I think everyone is very excited about the future of the Davenport school system. When I mentioned that all arrows are pointing up, I think people actually believe that. That's not to be dismissive of the fact that there's a great deal of hard work that still needs to be done. We have to continue to roll up our sleeves and work every day to improve many of the aspects of our operation. Everyone is acknowledging that. Everyone is willing to do that. But they want to do that with eyes looking forward. And I'm very proud to be able to lead a group of individuals who are forward-thinking and visionaries, yet still want to be held accountable for the work that comes ahead. So I'm very pleased with that and wanted to say thank you to the entire staff of the district. I also wanted to commend the community. I've had an opportunity to have a whole host of formal and informal meet and greets and sessions with individuals across the community. Not only has this community embraced me and my family, which I'm so proud of and thankful for, but they've been willing to provide productive feedback. There's one thing to have, individuals or people and, come and complain or whatever the issue is. But I'm very pleased with the fact that the individuals in this community don't just stop at complaining. They actually come and they have ideas and they have suggestions for improvement. And I'm very appreciative of that. And the fact that they're willing to give their input without fear of reprisals, I hope that bodes well for our future. So I'm very grateful to be in the community. The movers are coming on Wednesday, so I'll officially be completely moved in to my home. Right now I'm just sitting on a stadium chair watching TV, but pretty soon I'll have a house full of furniture and we'll be in great shape. But I'm pleased to be here in Davenport, not only in the school system, but also be a member of the Davenport community as a citizen. The last observation that I have is I would like to share this with my board members here as well as with the public. I've been taking obviously a very close look at the agendas and obviously contributing to the building of those agendas through the agenda committee. Moving forward, one of the things that I've challenged my administrators to do is to start to think of all the work that we're doing in this district, both at the classroom level and in our buildings, and making sure that we share what we're doing at the grassroots level with the Board of Education. I know there's a great deal of quote-unquote business that has to be tended to at the board level. There are quite a number of operational issues and HR pieces that we have to work our way through, but if I may, I'm going to suggest to this board and all future boards that we recalibrate to the point where we spend more time talking about student achievement. In my mind, student achievement is always job one, and I am going to make it a point with the entire administrative team to include our faculty and staff to bring information, to bring presentations to the Board of Education so that you have an in-depth understanding of what we're doing. Our Leadership Academy that's been up and running this year for a couple months has been doing extraordinary work in social, emotional, behavioral health of our students. You need to know what that work is and what that looks like, and our community and our parents need to know what that work is and what that looks like. To include academic progress. We're about to get a state report card. We do have more data that we'd like to share with you. But at the end of the day, I'm hoping that we revisit our mission statement to the point where we spend more time at this table on these evenings talking about students and talking about student achievement and accelerating the achievement of every student in every classroom every day. We'll get our business done, I promise you that, but we have to carve out more time for student achievement, and I think we will do that, and it's my job to help with that. But I've already challenged the team to start coming up with a schedule and a calendar for the year so that we can keep you up to date as to how we're doing and holding ourselves accountable specifically in the area of student achievement. So that's a little preview of my 100-day report. The last comment that I would like to offer this evening, and I apologize for the lengthiness of my report, but I have never had the opportunity to state this publicly yet, but I was at the SBRC meeting 2 weeks ago, and there were two main takeaways from that meeting that I think is very important for me to share with this board and also to share with this community. The first main takeaway is that the SBRC was very accommodating in the sense knowing that as a new superintendent, I explained to them my desire to evaluate programs and through that program evaluation effectuate a more efficient budgeting process in the future as opposed to just flat out percentage cuts across the board. And I think they were appreciative of that conversation and very understanding of it. They were also aware that there's a possibility of some turnover on our Board of Education coming in November. And as a result of that conversation, they did grant us an additional year to get to our goal of having a positive unspent fund balance. So that additional year, ladies and gentlemen, is really going to come in handy because prior to that meeting, we were required to have a positive unspent balance by the end of June of 2020. Now we have until June of 2021, which gives us a little bit more time to make thoughtful decisions about our budgeting and our school finances. The second piece that definitely resonated with me sitting at the table there was the SBRC's concern with the district and the board in particular being able to stick to a budget cutting plan and not to walk back some of the decisions that have been made. They're very cognizant of the fact that when you make budget cuts, there are going to be constituents who, depending on what those cuts are going to be disappointed or even unhappy with some of those cuts, and they'll come to board meetings and express themselves. The SBRC just wanted to make sure that the board had the intestinal fortitude to follow through with the cuts that they've already made, knowing that a plan was delivered to the SBRC last March. I think there's a little bit of flexibility built into that, but not a great deal. And as a board and as a district, we are going to have to show our commitment to our financial wherewithal moving forward, that when we make decisions, we can follow through with our budget and meet the expectations. And my hope is that that additional year that they granted to us will not be pulled away. I would hope that that wouldn't happen, but that depends upon our willingness to actually work a plan. So I'm hopeful that that's going to be the case. We have to appear in front of the SBRC again in December, and in a few days we'll be meeting with them so they can discuss with us the specific deliverables that they are looking for from us. But I'm confident that we can present a plan to them that will meet their specifications. But at the same time, they read our board meeting minutes, they read the newspaper, they know what's going on in this district quite closely. They're a very astute group of individuals who pay very close attention, they're very diligent. All that documentation that you approved prior to the SBRC meeting, They had it memorized. They knew it all. They really understand the business of school finance and have an understanding of what our challenge is and with those expectations. So I want to make sure it's very clear what the expectations are for the school district when it comes to the state level, and at the same time, making sure that our public has an understanding of the hill that we still have to climb moving forward. So, Mr. President, that concludes my superintendent's report for the evening.
Okay, thank you very much. You know, I'd say it's exceptionally rare that I make any comments after the superintendent report, and we don't have discussion after the superintendent report. However, I'm going to take a little liberty tonight and accentuate a couple of points that the superintendent made. And, and really, these are remarks that are made to our board. And we have a number of candidates that are in the audience this evening. And so some of you may be on the board after next month. And so these are words of just, I don't even know exactly how to describe them, except that the board has an incredible responsibility. And this committee, the SBRC, is, I believe it's a committee composed of people of the highest integrity. They do know what's going on with finance. They do know what's going on in Davenport. They do know what's happened in the paper. They know everything when it comes to finance, and they have a lot of staff people there to help them. Student achievement certainly is our number one issue that needs to be addressed, and the board is constantly thinking about that. The SBRC, however, is concerned, their number one, I think probably really is student achievement, but that doesn't come out in these meetings. In these meetings, their responsibility is to make sure that every district in the state, including ours, is solvent. What are we doing? If we are not complying with the requirements that they have, the SBRC, have for us, for our finances, then we, the board, are the ones that are responsible. The superintendent has a certain amount of responsibility for developing a plan, but the board, what you'll note is that the board supports a plan. If you've been coming for years, you'll see things like that. Sometimes the board will vote on a plan that's presented by the administration to demonstrate that support. But the budget itself is prepared by the superintendent. The superintendent says, well, let's do this, let's do that. What the board has asked for in the past is an amount of flexibility. And the reason is that the board has not wanted to pin themselves down, I would say. There are some big issues. Some of you addressed traditional versus block tonight. There are a lot of issues that can really upset people and that people have all sorts of different perspectives on. And what the board has responsibility of following through and making sure that we comply with the plan that the SBRC will approve. They approved the last plan that we presented to them. It was a 2-year plan and a 5-year plan. The 2-year plan is get to this point, and then 5 years is to demonstrate that we can sustain that over time. We aren't just going to get to a point and then get back. The reason that I'm speaking this evening is that I think it's crucial that our board have that fortitude to make these strong decisions and to support the superintendent's plan. If there's a need to change the plan, there can be discussion on that. And maybe there's a trade-off of, well, we could do this instead of that, but we, the board, have to be able to demonstrate that we're going to support that plan. Now, it's going to take some time for the superintendent to develop the plan, and as he indicated, the SBRC has given us a little bit of flexibility, but they are not going to give flexibility to the board. I will guarantee that if the board decides to not support a viable plan that meets the requirements of the SBRC. And the SBRC represents the state when it comes to finances. So this is really real. I just want all of the people on this board to take heart and to work with the superintendent in a really strong way so that we comply, and we can comply. But there are some tough issues. There'll be times when this room is packed with people because the board and the superintendent are making a recommendation to do something. There'll be a whole lot of people that are really upset with it. So some tough decisions coming up. I just want to say I wish I was going to be here to be part of it. But I have confidence in the future board. Whoever is on the board, you guys will be just fine. That's all I have to say, and I apologize for taking too much time, but it's such an important issue, I think, that the superintendent took the time to talk about this, and we, the board, and we, the future board, have to, we got to do it. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you. Let's move on to other items requiring action. We have motion for approval of candidate for Director District Number 3 for the Mississippi Bend Area Education Agency Board of Directors.
Mr. President,
Director Beck.
I move that the board approve and hereby cast the weighted vote for the board for candidate Scott Severide for Director District Number 3 for the Mississippi Bend Area Education Agency Board of Directors.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Director Beck.
Could I have someone explain how these people are chosen? And I get that there's an explanation on sort of where these people are coming from or why we're voting on these particular districts tonight rather than all of them. But I guess I want to know sort of who these people are and where they come from, because our packet doesn't really have a whole lot. Are they on the board now? Have they been on? How do they get chosen, I guess, is my question.
So I'm probably the best qualified to try to answer that, but it's a tough question. There are a number of board members on the AEA, and the directors are not all chosen at once. Similar to the way our board has 4 and 3 in consecutive years. The board or the directors are, I don't know exactly whether they're solicited in some manner by the AEA. Scott Severide, and I don't have the bios for any of these, but I know most of them. Scott Severide has been a director for some years, I would guess around 5. And part of what happens is that our district happens to cover a number of different sections, and that's why we end up voting. Did you have something you wanted to add in?
My name is Tom Lane. I'm the former executive director of the AEAs. And I thought maybe I could just help a little bit with this, if that's all right, Mr. President. AEAs have anywhere from 7 to 9 board members. School boards are 5 to 7. AEAs usually have 7 or 9. There are 9 AEAs across the state, and each one is individually governed by a board. those boards independently then assign one of their members to serve on the state board. Ralph, I think you're currently a member of the Mississippi Bend AEA board and have served for a while. Board members, he asked, they're typically solicited, to tell you the truth. Board members usually run unopposed, much like your board members are tonight in this situation. But across Iowa this month, school districts, just like you are doing tonight, will have candidates come up to serve from different regions of the AEA. You've got 3 individuals. I know all 3 of them, 2 of them very, very well, highly qualified people. And they are basically solicited to serve on the state area education agency board. So President Johansson was exactly right that they are staggered, much like board members are on this board, and that every 2 years you select new members. They serve a 4-year term, just like a school board member does. But that's what the situation is tonight. You've got 3 people who chose not to run again for board, and so Chief Bill Decker from Mississippi Bend truthfully called me on the phone. He said, "Tom, do you have some ideas for good people here?" He went out and called on some people to see who would be willing to serve on this board. They meet generally monthly, and that's who these folks are. They've agreed to serve on this board. All will do a very, very good job. Yes.
So they're typically retired educators or retired administrators, or have been AEA employees, or
You've hit all of them. Typically, they're a cross section of people, just like this board is. You have some people who are retired educators. The gentleman that you're talking about here right now is a retired elementary principal, I believe. You've got a former school board member, current state legislator, who's one of your candidates. Another one's former superintendent of Maquoketa, who's in charge of ed leadership at the University of Northern Iowa now. So you've got some high quality people that have agreed to serve on this board. But we've got mothers, young mothers who have a special ed child who want to take an interest, and they serve, and so they run the gamut of who serves on these.
Sorry for all the questions.
That's all right.
Last time this happened, I wasn't on the board yet, and so I know I was able to, and I believe we had elected Ken Crumweedy as one of our directors, and so he was able to come up and talk, and so I wasn't sure what the normal policy is for that, and so that's why
I
procedure.
go to a lot of board meetings, and I've never seen an AEA board member show up to chat with the board about
Well,
the
he happens to
candidates.
live here, so
Yeah, it could
and-
happen, but that's just not
Yeah.
typical.
Well, and I know we're 100% of 1, 2, and 3, correct? Is that
I believe that's right.
for AEA 9? So this is a volunteer position, as with our position, and they do similar types of things at the AEA level, deciding sort of legislative priorities and lobbying at the state level and things like that.
Yes.
Okay, that's all I needed to know. Thank you, Dr. Lane.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Lane, for helping us all understand that a little better. Is there any other discussion? Okay, we'll call for the vote. Director Beck,
Yes.
Director Potts.
Yes.
Director Gosa.
Yes.
My vote is yes. Motion carries. Thank you. May I have a motion regarding approval of candidate for Director District Number 4 for the Mississippi Bend AEA Board of Directors?
Mr. President,
Director Potts.
I move that the board approve the recommendation that the Davenport Community School Board approve and hereby cast the weighted vote of the board for candidate Joe Adams for Director District 4 of the Mississippi Bend Area Education Agency Board of Directors.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Okay, call for the vote. Director Potts,
Yes.
Director Gosa,
Yes.
Director Beck,
Yes.
and my vote is yes. Motion carries. Thank you. May I have a motion regarding approval of candidate for Director District Number 9 for the Mississippi Bend AEA Board of Directors?
Mr. President,
Director Beck,
I move that the board accept the recommendation and hereby to approve and hereby cast the weighted vote of the board for candidate Mike Deitschaver for Director, District Number 9 for the Mississippi Bend Area Education Agency Board of Directors. And I apologize if I horribly mispronounced his name.
You did very, very well. It's Dutch Shaver, but that's pretty close. Okay, thank you very much. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? All right, we will call for the vote. Director Beck,
Yes.
Director Gosa,
Yes.
Director Potts?
Yes.
And my vote is yes. Motion carries. Thank you. We're going to get into a discussion item right now. And one of the things that I wrote down on my notes is that I have an expectation that our student board members will want to enter into this discussion. You know, you saw a lot of open forum requests. There are a lot of people that have ideas about this, and I have every expectation that you will. And so I want to make sure that if I'm not getting your attention, wave your arms, do something, get my attention. The board and our community really, really, really want to hear you. They want to hear what your thoughts are. So please get into the discussion as we get into it. I'm going to ask Superintendent Kabilski if you want to open the discussion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I had originally assigned Associate Superintendent Scott the responsibility of reprising his presentation from a previous date, and when he scampered out of the room, I was wondering if that was for good reason or or whatever. But with all seriousness, just as sort of a lead into this conversation, I do believe the board made this decision quite a few months back with regard to our financial position, which was a key determinant in making this particular decision. I will add, though, as an educator, just some experiential piece, and I'll just take 1 minute of your time. I've been in districts that have valued block schedules. I've been in districts that have valued traditional schedules. As a matter of fact, I was a principal of a high school way back when, and actually gave a presentation to the community about the advantages of a block schedule. And to your point earlier, I had 200 people in the room that wanted no part of a block schedule. They were very committed to the traditional schedule that they have. One of the reasons that's the case is you'll find a large body of research in favor of block. You'll find a large body of research in favor of traditional. You'll find students that benefit from a block schedule. You'll find students that benefit from a traditional schedule. This is not one of those one-size-fits-all decisions, but what I did learn in that process, it is a community decision. It's important that whatever the community values is the piece that we have to understand. So as an educator, I'm looking at it through that lens. As the superintendent for nearly 100 days, I'm thinking back just about 10 minutes ago to my comments with regard to the SBRC, when we said in our plan in March that the transition from traditional to block would save approximately $1.2 million, and that was approved by this board and it was approved by the SBRC. That's their expectation. If we change our mind on this, I will tell you right now that SBRC will know about it, and we'll know about it first thing, probably before the night is out, as the conversation unfolds. Not that that should be the sole determinant of your decision, but please realize that there's a bigger picture to everything that we're about to discuss tonight. But I thought it was very important. The board did make a decision on this. It was based on information that was presented to the Board of Education with regard to research and financial data. And Associate Superintendent Scott, if you would be so kind, I know this was under your tutelage along the way. If you'd be so kind as to walk the board through the discussion that took place prior to that decision to go from block back to traditional schedule. Thank you.
Yeah, I would agree with a lot of the things that you're saying. There was a lot of conversation that I've talked to families about. Can you hear me okay, or no, a little bit closer? A lot of discussions with the families about that switching from traditional to block was not going to be a cost increase. And how can switching back now be such a cost savings? And the information that I've researched probably 5 years ago was that when we were on a traditional schedule back in the 1990s, most teachers were teaching 5 periods out of 7. So their teaching day really consisted of percentage-wise, about 72% of the day. So when we went to a block schedule, teachers were teaching 3 out of 4, it was 75% of the day. So there really were not much of a cost increase from a teaching standpoint. In looking to go back to a traditional schedule, which other schools are doing now, which our middle schools are doing now, teachers are teaching 6 periods out of 7. When I taught middle school at Wood, we taught 6 out of 8, and so your staffing was different. But now our current middle school staffing, or I should say 5 out of 7. At middle school was a 6 out of 8? 6 out of 8,
6
right?
out of 7.
But when they used to have team time, they used to actually teach one less than that.
Team time, right.
Yep. So we teach middle school now is 6 out of 7. So the high school would be looking at 6 out of 7. So your real cost savings from 25 years ago or from the 90s would be that it's from 5 sevens to 6 sevens of teaching time. Teachers are teaching 1 additional period. And that's really your cost savings. Going from the block to the traditional is the cost savings of the teacher time. Now, what does that actually mean for teachers? There's 2 different ways to look at it. The first part for teachers, they're going to teach a few more minutes in the day. So now teachers are going to be teaching 85% of the day of the amount of time that we have kids. Compared to in a block, they're going to teach 75% of the kids' day. That's the teaching time increase. For students are going to have, if I was switching my mathematic mind into fractions to make them closer, our current block is really 6/8 of a day, and we're going to be going to 6/7 of a day. That to make it closer than 3/4 and 6/7 to get the math. So you'll hear the 6 number is consistent. That's the teaching time. It's the 8 and the 7. It's the reduction of periods that students are going to have the option to take. So students would take 8 classes a day in a block because a block is doubled. So they have 8 choices every day. In a traditional, they're going to have 7. So they are losing elective choices throughout the course of their 4-year career. That's a cost savings for us because we're only teaching 7 periods a day, not 8, if we're looking at the block in an 8 model, which is really what it is. I know that's mathematical terms, but I'm just trying to say there really is a reduction, and you saw that in our board presentation of the elective credits that kids will need to take to graduate is because they have less choices. So instead of having 10.5 credits to graduate in elective credits, you're only going to need 6.5 credits. It's because you're not going to have as many opportunities in the school day. So that's kind of the mathematical part of it. I agree with the research. I found research on both sides, blocked or traditional. There were some really good aspects. There's talked about the hybrid. Why not go to a block where it's block and traditional together? Again, that would be more of that model of teachers teaching 6 out of 8, which is currently 3/4, which is the block model. You're not going to get any cost savings. You got the same amount of classes that kids have to take, so you're not saving any money. We're not reducing the elective options of kids, and we're not making teachers teach a longer day. So there's no cost savings in there. It's really a financial decision. I could not sit here and argue on behalf of the traditional and block. I could argue for a half an hour on one, and I could argue for half an hour on the other and show the benefits on both sides of them, because there are some really good parts of both of them. And quite honestly, if financial wasn't a decision, I probably personally, as a recommendation, would recommend that we would go to an AB block schedule, because you'd have it every other day. But that's a whole nother discussion that we didn't get down to 2 years ago because this was a financial decision. And so we didn't go that path in our schools. So I think I probably confused you just enough for you to ask me some questions. Yes.
Mr. Scott, was the 1.2 million, was that the number that was presented to the SBRC as the potential savings of this switch?
Yeah, 1.2. We actually had a number. The teacher savings is probably about 1.5, but because there are costs, whether textbooks or para, because our teachers do some supervision during their prep periods in the block schedule, and so there would be some costs of para recovery time along with some textbooks.
Thank you.
So is the administration done kind of making the presentation?
I'm sure yes, I'm good.
And you're prepared then for
Yeah, and if they
discussion
had
and
questions about the documents from the previous documents or anything I said today, yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Director Beck.
So when you say the last time the Davenport schools were on the traditional schedule, it was the teachers were teaching 6/8, right? 75% of the day?
They were teaching 5 out of 7.
5 out of 7.
When we were on the
Okay.
traditional the last time.
Okay, so it was still 7 periods.
Yes.
All right, so without lengthening the day, in order to get 8 periods, we'd have to lengthen the day, correct?
Actually, that when the periods switch around, even if we were to go to, let's say we went to a modified block next year, we would not lengthen the day, we would shorten the periods up.
Okay,
So instead of 6 periods in 7 days, there'd be 6 in 8, and each period would be 5 minutes less.
okay, all right, thank you.
Any other discussion? Director Beck.
Well, I have quite a few things, but I don't know if you wanted to get
Go for it.
student comment first or.
We will when they're ready.
Okay, so I have 3 questions that I had before we even got here, and then a comment. So I'll start with my questions. First of all, so we've heard a couple people talking about doubling up. I think you may have answered this already. So if you were to have, say, 7 periods in a day, and let's say first and second period were combined, so that was a double block, a double period.
Double period.
So let's say a math teacher taught algebra the first semester and geometry the second semester on a double period. Would that,
And we will be doing some of that with some of our classes that
Okay.
have been approved by curriculum.
Okay.
So if it's whether I'm thinking of a welding class or some of the examples we've gone through, maybe I don't know if foreign language is another one. I don't have a list right in front of me, but we are doing that through the curriculum department, researching with all the specialists which classes do need to be double period.
Okay.
I'm thinking of a AP chemistry class is going to be a double period. It will not last the whole year. Then it'll only last a semester.
right?
Mhm.
Okay. I mean,
So we'll still have a few classes that are under what you would call a block
yeah.
class type,
Yeah.
but we'll call it a double period.
Okay. So one of the big concerns that people have had is not necessarily the academic courses, but the things like band, orchestra, and choir. Are those things that you guys are exploring as having a double period, or
Not the band and
Okay.
the choir. No, right now, because right now we have 1 period. The band is actually taking up 25% of a high school schedule because it takes up one of the 4 periods every
Oh,
year for
okay.
4 years. And so actually, for students that aren't in orchestra, band, and choir, this may end up being a good thing because this could free up some of their schedule for a different elective. Whereas if you were just in band, you're going to take 90 minutes of band for 4 years all along, where you could probably do 45 minutes and then go to another elective, whether it would be another lit class or yearbook or something like that.
or choir or orchestra?
Yeah, or you could be in choir or orchestra.
Okay.
You actually, and if your schedule fit, you could probably take 3 periods of, you could take band, choir, and orchestra. You could have all 3 in a separate period and not have to fluctuate the days back and forth.
Okay. All right. So that's my first question. My second question then was, did we have show choir, band, and all of these things that we've been hearing about when we were on the traditional schedule in the 90s or whatever?
Oh, yes, show choir. Well, we had show choir when I was at Central, so yes, I know we had it way back in the 80s. And
Okay.
marching band, yes. Yes. You got mic'd out.
Here.
Here. Here. It must be low on battery.
I talk too much. Okay. Apparently, I killed my mic. So we've had all of those electives on a traditional schedule. Is basically what I'm trying to.
I would say that because not knowing exactly over the last 30 years,
Yeah.
I would say that I'm sure some of the things were outside of the school day.
Right.
So they may have been some 8-period days or 0-period days before and after.
Okay.
Like we currently have some of our show choirs that are in the school day at some schools, outside the school days at other
Right.
schools.
Okay. I guess my other question is, most of the parents I've heard from and that we've heard from are parents of what I would consider high achieving students in terms of doing a lot of different things. They're involved in a lot of extracurriculars. They take a lot of electives. They're interested in school. Even if they're not the best student, they're engaged in some way. How would this change affect students whose families we haven't heard from. For example, how would this affect special education, particularly pull-out services? And how would this affect students who are sort of just your average student who's not involved in a lot of extracurricular? How would it affect those students? Or would it? Maybe it wouldn't. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, I think you could argue both sides of it. I'd say I don't want to speak for special ed in general, but I think I know that scheduling on special ed in the block schedule was more difficult because I may need a resource period for 45 minutes, but really it's a 90-minute period. So there would be an opportunity for me to take a little bit more of a resource period, but we're doing more pull in and push out now, much different than we've done in the past. I know there are some courses that are better off being year long. That's part of my comment. Even if you were to say we know where we can get another 1.2 million and we're gonna stay with the block, then I'm probably gonna come back with a recommendation about the AB block, because I believe there are some classes that need to stretch out, because you could go a year of no math. You could have geometry your first semester of your 10th grade year and algebra 2 your second semester of that year, and hope a whole year of not one math class. That's not a good educational situation. We see that with our seniors that don't have math and they're testing in for colleges. So I think there's, again, benefits both ways. I think for the average student, I think there's the caseload. One of the parents talked about having only 4 classes to worry about. That is a good thing.
Right.
It is.
Right.
But as having a golfer myself and my son, when you do miss larger chunks of material.
Right.
So I have a lot more to make up
Okay.
in a quicker time, because that class only goes for a quarter. And if I missed 8 days for golf during a quarter, I've got to make up those 8 classes because the class doesn't run past the first quarter. Whereas if it runs a semester, I have a longer time to make up the material.
Right.
But again, it's going to be the organization of the student a little bit too. Some are going to like that block model a lot better. Some are going to want the 7 periods.
Okay. So that was the end of my questions. Can I make a comment?
Sure.
Okay. So as an educator, I teach. I've taught on. I teach 3 days a week on what would be considered a traditional schedule, where my classes are 50 minutes, and I also teach a double period, because I teach 8 weeks and 8 weeks in a 16-week semester. So we get 2 courses in one semester. We have a 2-hour block every day. I also have taught hour and 15-minute periods, and each one has its benefits and drawbacks. So, and I've had students who thrived in one. The longer periods, because maybe I could do a couple more active learning activities where I got hands-on with them, but then other students who really thrive on the 50-minute periods, because it's smaller chunks of information to take on, and they have a little bit more time to complete their homework, or if they miss a day, they're only behind one day. So as an educator, I can see both sides of this. But on this board, we are beholden to both the taxpayers and the state. And I want people to know that I hear what people are saying. I hear every time somebody comes up for open forum, I hear what they're saying and I write it down and I think about it. But we are also in financial dire straits, and we were in those dire straits when I was elected to the board. We were presented with a budget that included this change, and I believe we voted on it. One of my very first budget votes included a change to back to traditional scheduling. We have emphasized as a board that we wanted fluidity and flexibility, and the school budget review committee has been accommodating to a point, but that fluidity and flexibility really doesn't apply to the dollar amounts that they want us to cut. They are asking us, and I was at the meeting by a phone, what was it, last week or the week before, and I heard them talking to us as a board. They said they do not trust that we can actually follow through with tough decisions. And so we are in a tough place, and I'm saying this for anybody who's running for the board, who is currently on the board. The state expects us to stick with our plans. Now, if those plans are not pedagogically sound, or they're not going to help student achievement, or they're just completely horrifically wrong, that's one thing, but those are not our plans. Our plans are solid plans. They've been researched by the administration. They were presented to us, and we voted on them multiple times. We've had this in our plan for quite some time. And unless we can find an extra $1.2 million in somebody's closet or their other pair of pants, there's not a whole lot of other options here. And as much as I would like to be able to make everyone happy, it's just not possible. And one of the things that I was elected to do was to make the tough decisions, because not everybody can do that. And so I like to think of that as part of my job. I don't take it lightly, but if we said that we were going to make this change, and the School Budget Review Committee has the power to take away our accreditation, they have the power to do a lot of things if we don't stick with our plans. And so my advice is that we not walk this back as much as possible. But I'm also very cognizant that I want to make sure that we do what's best for our students at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you for those questions and comments. Is there any other discussion? Lauren.
I also have a question and then some comments. You said, I think that the teachers would then be teaching 6 out of 7 periods, right?
Yes.
Which is what saves a majority of the money, is that?
The majority of the money actually is the reduction of the student choice. I mean, the teachers are going to teach a little bit more time in the day, a few more minutes, but the student hours, school hours that we certify, 1,080 hours, is going to stay the same. So the same amount of contact time for the student.
Okay, so I guess teaching 6 out of 7 of the days, what's the difference between going to an AB block scheduling day and giving a teacher a prep every other day?
There's nothing wrong with that. That would be a union item that we'd have to discuss with the teachers, because that math does work. The math that you're talking about, where I teach 7 out of 8, I teach 4 periods on one day and 3 the next day. And if I was on AB, I'd have really the same amount of prep time as a teacher. Yes, that is a choice that's out there. But it just it would be something that would have to be worked with with the teachers union.
Can I ask a clarifying question that relates to that?
I need to have her as one of my schedulers for my school.
Okay, I hate to get too confused here. What are you trying to clarify?
So you said that the math that Lauren just mentioned, AB block with a prep period every other day, is essentially the same math as the 6 out of 7.
It does. It saves the same. That saves the money for the.
Okay.
It does.
And that's never been presented to us as a board?
Well, it hasn't, because teachers would not be getting
Okay.
a prep period in the day.
So that's what I was going to ask. What have the teachers agreed to?
They haven't agreed to.
Okay.
In the current, the reason this hasn't come up until now is because the Chapter 20 law has changed, and also the teacher contract law.
Okay.
Teacher contract is coming up at the end of the year.
Okay.
That would have to be, the union would have to come forward saying, we would like to have a discussion around that, because it would not give their members a prep during the day, but then would give them an hour and a half the next day.
Right.
It's really the same amount of prep time for them.
Okay.
But they'd have to bring that forward.
Okay. Thank you. I'm sorry to interrupt, Lauren.
So the math on that is actually a little bit better, which I think is kind of alarming, that you'd actually be giving more time to teaching than 6 out of 7, because 7 out of 8 is anyway.
You're talking about, yes, you're talking about a few fractions in there, and I've done that math of the equation you're talking about. And from the teacher time, the advantage is I'm still getting my hour and a half of prep every other day, but I'm just not getting it 45 minutes one day, 45 minutes. Now, in a 6 out of 7, you actually are getting a 50-minute prep, so you actually would get 10 more minutes. So that's where you're seeing the math just be a little bit different.
So I guess it might be kind of clear that I agree with those that support the block schedule over the traditional. I take AP Statistics. I take it at North, even though I am a Central student, because at Central it's hosted at the same time as AP Biology, which I'm also taking. I'm allowed to do this because it's on a block schedule. I can drive over to North and only miss about 5 minutes of AP Bio and then 5 minutes of AP Stat, which is not very big on a 90-minute block. However, if I was missing 5 minutes every day on a 45-minute schedule, you can see the. There are 5 students in my AP Chem class at Central that come from West because they do not teach AP Chemistry at all. And there's one in my AP Biology class that comes from West because they don't teach AP Bio either. It was addressed earlier that it highly affects a lot of students from different levels, and I can advocate that as a student that's in a lot of AP classes, it would be very difficult to even, like, that's almost impossible on a period scheduling. I'm looking to major in biochemistry, and if I were in the West students' place and couldn't take AP Biology or AP Chemistry, I would be behind when applying to colleges or scholarships because I don't have college experience classes. I guess I just think that puts us behind other students in some other districts, and to me that isn't student achievement comparatively. Yeah, that's pretty much what I was.
So what I think there's a question a little bit in there. So I would say that one of my jobs would be to be working with all 3 of our schools to coordinate schedules. So these classes we consider are the conflicts. You know, there are 1,600 different courses running all, during our schools, but I would have to make sure those classes are offered first period or 7th period or maybe attached to the lunch period of the ones I knew that we were going to have the majority of our kids going back and forth to school. So maybe they would start first period and that class would actually start 5 minutes earlier so that there was some travel time. I don't disagree with your argument at all as far as the travel time with traditional is extremely, it's much harder than it is with the block. Absolutely.
Thank you, Lauren. Director Gosa.
First, thank you for that very much. I appreciate that. Secondly, the SBRC, I appreciate you saying that. But I do remember being at the State Board of Education who crucified us that we don't listen to the public. When we had this discussion, students weren't involved, parents weren't involved, or teachers. I still don't see, I've seen a student, we've had parents come for open forum. I still haven't heard anything from teachers. That's why I wanted to bring this up. That's a great idea. I don't know why we can't look into doing that. I'm not an educator. I never have been. I graduated. I went into an apprenticeship program. I'm a construction worker. If I wasn't able to take all the wood shops and all the other classes that I was able to do, I might not be doing what I'm doing. It was something that kept me interested in school while I was in school. It was why I wanted to go to school, because I was able to do that stuff. And that's me, but there's other kids out there. The whole reason they go to school is for these certain things. But you gotta do good in your other classes to be able to keep doing these. So I think, in a sense of taking some of that away, we are setting our kids up to fail. Granted, not every kid's gonna go to college, and I know everybody thinks that, and we used to push that for years and years. I'll tell you, in my industry, in the construction world, we're gonna be short 15,000 workers in the workforce in the next 5 years. That's a lot of jobs. Because everybody, college. A lot of people I went to school with, they might still live in their parents' basement and stuff, but they got that college degree, and good for them for that. But again, in our priorities and everything like that, we're trying to set our kids up for success. And I feel going back to that hinders them. And I just want to be clear, the only savings we get is the 20 full-time employee positions that we cut. That's the one point, because then we'd have to hire 300 paras, right?
Yeah, it comes out to about 24 teachers, depending on, but again, the schedule, it's 4 different high schools I'm working with, or 3 different high schools, I should say.
Right.
So that's why, yes, the finding is it's 1.2. That is from that.
Right. And then, like was brought up, totally stole my thunder, and good for you, because it's better coming from a student. I really appreciate that. But having to travel between the schools too, that's a real issue that a lot of students do that. And I think if we were able to look into the other method that was brought up, I think that would be a great thing. I would be interested to see that.
Sure.
Again, I've always spoke out against the traditional and not sticking with the block. And I really can't say anymore. You did a very great job. I really appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Superintendent Kabilski.
And again, not to have the absolute answer to this, but in listening to Lauren's comments, there are a whole host of models that are out there that are just not either or, block or traditional. I was on a conference call last week with a group of superintendents from Pennsylvania, and the context of our phone call was, how do we still have school on a snow day? Districts that have one-to-one technology, for example, which we do, many districts, and my previous district, we were exploring a method for when we called a snow day, our students could still connect digitally with their teachers, and we can conduct a full day of school even though we're not physically in the building. I bring that up only because as I look at the future of education, and we talk about the independent learning, and we talk about the internships and the CTE programs that we have for our students here in the district, which is one of the crown jewels of this district. What you see most high schools doing is typically by senior year, you should have a senior that perhaps is maybe spending half their day in a building. Maybe the other half of their day they're working out in the field, either on a construction site or working in an internship, or they're taking online courses. For those of you that have students at the university level right now, you'll realize that many of our students at the university level are taking online courses. They're not all going to class every single day. I know both my daughter and son have had one online course every single semester. So I think as a district, it would behoove us to, to take a look at some of those options out there, because I know we're struggling with the either or component of that, but one option would be to stay with a traditional schedule, but allow for online courses that perhaps can have the student take that one extra course that they couldn't fit into their schedule, but it happens to be an online course, or hybrid courses where sometimes they come to class once, maybe twice a week, but the rest of the work is digital. So the world is evolving. It troubles me a bit that we have to have students traveling all around the district to take classes when I've worked in districts where we've had classrooms with students from all around the state. Nobody traveled. We just got on our computer and we had class together. So there are multiple ways to solve this problem. Distance learning is quite popular, especially with courses that, for example, if you have a course where you only have 6 students in this district and 6 students in another district and 6 in another, well, the individual districts would not run that course. But if we got together in a digital learning platform with a learning management system, you would have 18 students who could take that class with one teacher. So I think there's an element of creativity that could be put into place, but it would work under a traditional system. And the point, I guess, that I'm trying to make is, if we needed to, we can explore some additional options for you to take a look at. But at the same time, I certainly don't want to give the message that we're going to be dismissive of the savings that we're going to have. I think we have to maintain the savings and try and look for curricular and delivery options that will allow us to still have those savings and meet the students' needs at the same time. But we're not going to create a digital learning platform in 8 months. Right? That's a big dilemma for us right now. So that's a thought also. Anyway.
Director Beck.
So I teach online courses as well. And I know I'm probably going to come off as a Luddite for saying this, but there's no replacement for face-to-face teaching. My students, I've seen it. Most students do better when they're in a face-to-face situation, particularly high school students and the students I teach who are fresh out of high school or they're dual enrolled. It takes a very self-motivated person to be able to succeed in an online environment unless it is structured very carefully. And by carefully, what I mean is distance learning where everyone's linked up to a video screen would be a different way of doing that. So I could see that happening for a lecture in an AP Bio class, but certainly lab times would have to be hands-on and in the same place. And so I think that's great that you've mentioned some of the creative solutions. I personally have grave concerns about asking our students to take online courses because I really don't think that they are, as much as some places say they do them well, I don't think they're the same. And I think there's not enough evidence to show, well, there's a lot of evidence that shows our students are already spending a lot of time on their screens and they're not managing it productively, or they're not trained how to manage it productively. And so I'd be concerned with adding purely online courses into the mix. But I do like the idea of either coming up with a creative way of doing a traditional schedule and potentially distance learning, because it does seem silly to me that students have to go to a different high school to take a class. But I also understand the reality of we just don't have enough teachers to teach a class that's that specialized in every building. So
I hope I didn't suggest that we were going to require online. Online requires, you're right, a student with perseverance and diligence, and they're not for everybody. But we do have students that have those capabilities, and we have students that will be going on to colleges and universities that will have to experience that as freshmen. So if we can prepare them for that experience, great. I'm not suggesting that that's our policy, that you have to take online. To me, I'm just looking at a particular group of students that would benefit from an online course. So I don't disagree with you with that. The other piece is, the distance learning piece does work when you connect with a video with the teacher, and it typically, it doesn't work in lab settings. It's not meant for a chemistry class, but we ran a linear calculus class. I forgot what the heck it was, and it was a very high order class, and we connected to one teacher, and it was 4 different school districts. And it was the same teacher who was on the screen, but there was also a camera inside each of those classrooms, and they could see and interact with each other. It works for some students. Again, one of the things I always like to emphasize is we just can't have a one-size-fits-all model. Whatever we do and whatever we come up with, we're going to try and meet the needs of as many as we can, but we're certainly not going to shoehorn students into situations that don't make sense for them.
okay.
Thank you. Director Gosa, and then Lauren, we'll come back to you. Okay.
A couple things. One of you were talking about students doing like an online class before after school. So my issue with that is not every student has the internet, and every student's different backgrounds, right? Their parents might not have the internet. I'll use my kid as an example. I have a freshman at North High School right now. If I said, hey buddy, you got to do this class online, after you get done at the end of the day, we have 3 other kids in the house. I work, and my wife's a full-time stay-at-home mom, and bless her heart for that. But she's also trying to help our 1st grader with her homework, make sure my 7th grader has her homework, and then to add, well, now we got to make sure that Alex gets on his computer and he is doing this class and he's getting the stuff done. And I myself, I disagree with the whole doing a class, online classes anyway. But my whole job, I have to read people's body language, right? I have to know when I'm talking to you that you really are taking in what I'm saying, and stuff like that. And I think we'll be setting our teachers back because they're not really able to read those students, engage those students. I would, and I know it's a new day and age and everything like that, and I understand that. One of the other questions I had for the traditional part, though, we would have to be purchasing more textbooks and stuff, correct? For that?
Yes.
So that's an additional cost.
Yes, and some of that is in that cost of why it's 1.2. So I think 3 years ago or 4 years ago, you may have seen a number of 1.5, and that's why we switched it to 1.2. And the latest proposal was because of the textbooks, and we also have just textbook purchases that we've been not doing for the last couple of years because that was one of the board reductions also.
So out of the 20 full-time employee positions that would be done, that would cover the cost of the extra textbooks and everything like that?
In switching the staffing, yeah. Whether I don't know that number, the 20 number you're referring to right in front of me.
Well, it's what
it's
you
it's
guys
what I have in my
presented.
document.
Yeah.
I believe you. And so, but yeah, so that would be the number. Whatever the reduction in the staff is, would be the 1.2 number, was what you guys would save on your budget outside of the textbook purchases.
Okay.
Now that's just the textbooks needed to go from block to traditional. So if we were due for a textbook adoption, or we had a textbook that was outdated, that wouldn't be what I had calculated. I just had calculated that you needed this many additional textbooks. And in some of our areas, we have not exactly enough, but pretty close to be able to switch from block to traditional, because we have enough textbooks because they were shared all over at different schools. But we do have some holes where we'd have to order, or we'd have to go to a classroom set for that.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm not getting close enough. Classroom set for that.
Okay. And then one last thing, unless it leads to something else, but the scheduling, like Lauren was suggesting, you would just have to get the teachers involved on this and agree to that. So had they been involved in the discussion from the get-go, we could have maybe came up with this before. I'm just asking.
You know what, I could actually answer that question, given the fact of the law change and the fact that our contract, correct me if I'm wrong, expires on June 30th of 2020. We could make this decision unilaterally. I wouldn't recommend doing that. I think we should engage our staff in a conversation. So if we want to explore, because in the schedule that they're talking about, while yes, we can do it, it makes for one long, tough day every other day for teachers without a prep, if you understand what I mean by that. So I would definitely like to get their feedback on that. Legally, after the 30th of June, we have the ability to just make those decisions. I don't like operating that way, and I don't think we should as a district. I'd like to have a collaborative culture and climate with our workforce. So I would like to get the teacher input on a topic such as this to say, would you be willing to work an entire day without a prep, knowing that you would have two the next day? It'd be very interesting to see how they would answer that question.
Right, and that's what I'm asking, why they were never involved in it, because I know they were pretty worked well together for the last negotiations and stuff like that. And I understand the state of Iowa hates educators and public sector workers and gut all their rights. I get that. I'm not for that. I think that's a terrible thing. It'd be like me going to my wife every year and saying, hey, do you want to stay married, to recertify? That's just ridiculous and asinine. But my biggest thing is why we didn't include everybody. That's what I've been getting at the whole time. And I just don't understand that when we get told by the state board that we don't get input from the community, we didn't get input from our teachers, students, and now, like always, it's too far along and we got to roll with it.
Dr. Koza, I stood in front of entire schools, parents groups, and they fired questions at me, and I did do that. I did have community meetings. Teachers were involved in those meetings. All that information was out there, and so we did do all that. I stood in front of all those families and parents and talked about that.
Okay, so like we had town halls on that.
Yeah, I did.
Because I don't remember ever seeing nothing like that
Yeah,
being presented at the board. But I could be wrong.
No, but
I appreciate that.
But I mean, it's, and then a lot of our discussion just in the last 2 years was, because we presented a lot of information, there wasn't this research to say go one way or the other. So then it just became a financial discussion. Then it wasn't about the community choice. Then it was about how else was the district going to save the 1.2 million? That's really where the discussion has been the last 2 years. It's not been around community input as far as, do you want to keep the block or traditional, because there wasn't a different choice of, well, there was other choices, closing schools, different things that could happen, and that was one of the things that was chosen.
Right.
So, but I did stand in front of the community. We did have open forums for them to say every question possibly.
Okay. Yeah, because I just never remember them being announced on our consent agenda or communications, upcoming events. I'll leave it at that for now.
Okay, thank you. And I'm going to go to Lauren. No, Lauren, you've been waiting quite a while, and then I'll come back over here. Go ahead, Lauren.
So I'll try to keep it short because I kind of already talked too much. But I just had a couple questions, I guess, or comments. With the block, you have been saying a lot about there are benefits and negatives to both. And I don't think that the AB block day is the solution to everything, because, I mean, the prerequisites, it doesn't cover that. You're still taking them at the same time. But I do believe that it's more of a meet in the middle than just a transition or just a block. So I think that that sets the most students up for achievement because it meets in the middle. I guess I just don't understand where that, like, we keep talking about how there's really not a way to meet in the middle, and I guess I'm trying to understand what the issue with that would be.
With the AB block?
Yeah.
Quite honestly, it's the teacher. I mean, there's just not a prep during the day for the teachers. The teachers would just teach 4 periods in a single day. There wouldn't be.
I guess I would just be interested to see what the difference between that and teaching double the kids every day, even though, I mean, having a prep in the middle but still teaching double the days or double the kids doesn't seem any easier than not having a prep in the middle.
Well, you still have the same, yes, you still have the same amount of kids. As for example, I'm going to see 180 kids during the year, but I'm going to have 90 kids in the first semester and 90 in the second semester. I'm still going to have 180 different relationships I'm making throughout the year, whether I'm with the block or I'm with the traditional. I'm just going to have 180 right away to start making in August, whereas I'm not going to. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I was referring to more of the per day, like number of students
Right,
you
per day.
have to
Mhm.
interact with. Another thing is I know we weren't super focused on the online learning. However, I did take an AP class online. I'm a pretty top performing student and I'm pretty self-motivated. And I did okay, but I didn't learn a ton from it because I couldn't raise my hand and ask the teacher something. I could email her, but she can't explain it to me to my face. She's going to take my question from exactly what I typed and send me something back maybe 2-3 days later when I already took the quiz that I needed to know that for. So I guess I don't think that that's a very good solution for many students. I think that it could work for some, but as a top performing student, it didn't work for me. So I don't know how it would work for students that aren't self-motivated. That's all. That's all I really have.
Thank you, Lauren. Director Potts.
The discussion about block schedule and eliminating block schedule goes back a decade or more. It's come up repeatedly when we've hit a financial wall. And every time it's come up, the decision has been made to preserve it. And the 1.2 million has come from someplace else. Okay, that's just the way it is. But every time it comes up, the 1.2 million comes from someplace else. The someplace else is larger elementary classes or larger intermediate classes or no team time in the intermediates anymore or paraeducators going to only 5 hours a day so they don't have to get, benefits, or we train bus routes, or we do this, or we do. So it's, it's gotten to the point where I don't know where we have any place else to go. And nobody likes to weigh course choices for students against the financial ledger. Nobody likes to be Scrooge. But I don't know where, and I had 3 kids, went to Central, regular schedule. And, they all made it, they all survived. They had a lot of work to do. It was more but that's what they were used to in junior high anyway. But I had the last 3 at block schedule. And I can tell you, one of them might not have graduated if it wasn't for block schedule. Okay? That's the way the world is. It would have been a lot more work, a lot more effort. But I also had the other 2 never seemed to have homework. Because in their 90-minute block, they got to do their homework in the block. And when we originally went to block, it wasn't supposed to be that way. It was supposed to be 90 minutes of instruction. Now that's, neither here nor there. For the one who the block schedule was the lifesaver, that homework time was very important. Very important. But I bring this up only in that it sounds harsh at times to say, you know, I know what you're talking about, and I know what those moms are talking about, because I was a parent and I talked about it. But it gets down to dollars. It always gets down to dollars. Yeah, and if an A-B block schedule saves the same amount of teachers, in other words, saves the money, then we should take a look at that. But it doesn't involve us being able to simply make the decision. Changing from the block to the traditional is within our, we could make that decision. But the other decision requires impact on teachers different than any impact on teachers we've ever tried to make before. And I think that has to weigh on the scale. You know, perhaps you can do stuff in that A-B block schedule where you line up a bunch of skinnies so a teacher does get a little time, you know. But I also know teachers. And I know teachers, if you've got a 90-minute block and a 90-minute block and a 90-minute block, you're going to work in desk time. That's what we used to call it, desk time, where the kids are working on something and you're there, but you can get some of your stuff done too. That's all.
Is there any more discussion? Director Beck.
I'm going to try and kill this mic too, apparently. I'd like to thank Director Potts for articulating what I was trying to articulate before, and that at certain point, there's nothing left to cut. And I'd like to point out to Director Gosa that this was in a plan ages ago, and we voted on the plan.
And I voted no.
Yep. And so it's not like this is just coming up now. It's been in the plan for a while. And as Director Potts pointed out, it's actually been discussed multiple times over the years. And to answer Lauren's question, and Director Potts talked about this, the teachers have their contract coming up. And so part of our job as a board is to, they essentially, when there's a union, we're negotiating with the union to come to a terms of agreement. And a lot of what we are allowed to negotiate for is gone. And so we have a lot less leeway in coming to agreement anymore. And so some things are changing in terms of how this will be the first contract up since the law changed. And so there's some uncertainty there. Just so you know, that's part of what this uncertainty is about. But as Director Potts said, having prep time on alternate days is something very different than anything that we've done before, where there was always prep time every day. And so that's why it's more important. It's something that we absolutely need to talk to the teachers about before we can do that.
Looks like we're winding toward a close. Do any of you have any additional comments? Sure, Lauren.
I just wanted to respond to you that, like, those points, like, I can see both sides too. And that, yeah, I guess I just understand both. I don't think that you guys should today say, and I know you can't, let's not do this, let's just go back to block scheduling. However, I just think there are other ideas. Maybe if it's not the AB day, but somebody might have a different idea.
Mm-hmm.
I think those need to be considered somewhere, because I think some of them do solve some of the same issues that we're working to, and it doesn't seem like along the way there was a appropriate slot for them to be presented, I guess, before it was too late now, I guess. But thank you.
You're brilliant in your comments. You really are. none of this happens in a vacuum. Everybody is involved to some extent. We had 5 people that came up and spoke earlier. I don't recall if they were all on this subject, but I know that a majority were. And different people will have different ideas, and our administration is clearly listening. And if they can come up with a better idea, they will. And they're searching hard to make this the best solution, whatever that is. And then the board has that responsibility of being the fiscal overseer of the whole thing. And so, yeah, there's going to be people that aren't happy no matter what decision is made here. But it is true. Really, tonight's discussion is really to see where we are. Because if the board was at a position that they wanted to do something different, then the administration would have to start looking for something different. This was voted on, I think, a couple of years ago. I don't recall exactly where it was, but it was part of a plan. And in fact, I think after it was voted on, Mr. Scott came up and the board started asking questions like, oh, is this really going to happen? And I think the board kind of stunned Mr. Scott with some of the questions there. So right now it's moving in that direction. And I don't know where the administration is, but they'll take this whole discussion, digest it, think about it, and move in a certain direction. There's a lot that would have to be decided no matter what were to happen. So, any other discussion? Director Gosa.
What does this do to dual enrollment as well as like the Creative Arts Academy? Because that's all extracurriculars.
Yeah, I've worked out a schedule with North, for example. So the schedule we met last year with Eastern Iowa Community College to make sure that that schedule would work for our students, and it does fit in the traditional schedule.
So they would still be able to take all the classes they need
Yep.
to for that.
Mhm.
evening
We have a
Thursday
sample
production.
schedule that we worked out for our students over there to make sure that it still fits, and it does.
I got you on record saying that.
And I have a document to show you. Yes.
And then what about the Creative Arts Academy?
Yeah, the Creative Arts Academy works through the elective schedule at the middle school for our middle school kids, and so it still fits, and the same thing for the high school. We've worked that through there. I mean, we've had to make some modifications, but again, the credits will reduce on the amount of other electives that they have to have, so it is going to fit also. We've been making some adjustments at the high school because the creative arts is a little bit harder to run at the high school level. But at the middle school, there's no impact at all from what that's doing over there. And it's not impacted by this change in the high school one. It's just determining, again, these couple courses that may have to be double blocked because of the travel time, because some of these classes are off-site.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I appreciate everything you did. Obviously, I've been against this from the start. I've always spoke out against it. I've always voted against it. I just wish that we would have been able to work with the teachers on this and presented it to them, because I know if I would have said, hey, I want you to cut X amount of administrators to come up with this money, then we would have had to stop and look into all kinds of stuff. I hate the way that things work out sometimes. It's a bad deal. And again, and I'll tell that to the SPHC, the state board, whoever's listening. I'm strongly against this. And if they don't like that, my phone number is public record, and they can feel free to call me.
Yeah, I would reflect on that, just say that I do sit on the labor management board with the union on behalf of the district, and we've made them aware of this, throughout the whole course, and that's been a topic, and we've discussed some of the items in here, but yeah, we've never seen any kind of thing come back to us or whatever like that, but it doesn't mean things may not in the future.
That's 20 of their members.
Are you done there?
I'm done.
Okay, thank
I'm
you.
just gonna get madder.
Okay, thank you. Lauren, did you have something additional?
I think we've mentioned a lot doing the double periods to create a block, and I think there are a lot of classes that would need that. So I guess I'm just wondering, once you get to a certain point of how many need that, you can't fit them in a schedule anymore without block scheduling. I just don't think that's setting your students up for success, especially in AP classes.
I don't know, Mr. Scott, if you want to respond or just take that as a comment.
I didn't know if that was a statement, so I would just, yeah, we are looking at putting classes together for double period classes. We've got our base that we're starting with. That doesn't mean that won't expand as we realize more classes, and teachers and principals advocate for that in the future. But I think there's a lot more, from my perspective, there's a lot more classes that would maintain on the traditional model of 45 minutes and would be beneficial for them. So there's a lot of those that fit into the schedule, so the schedule would still run. When you're talking, again, you're talking about, for example, 1,500 kids taking 4 classes. There's a 6,000 choices, or whatever. It's a lot of models out there for the computer to make it fit.
Okay. Any other discussion? If not, thank you all very much. That was a great discussion on block versus traditional. The board and the administration will be considering everything that went on here this evening. We have one additional discussion item, and that's the Phase 2 update. And I would gauge that we probably have enough time to continue our discussion then. Superintendent Kabilski.
I just have a 1-minute update. We submitted our continuum of services plan, which was the next item that was due for consideration for our citations. We were due to get a response on November 1st. That response is delayed due to a family emergency as a result of for one of the individuals at the Department of Education. Department of Education has been very apologetic for that delay, and they will get an answer to us by November 8th that we can get back to the Board of Education. But again, we submitted all of our documents, and through some unfortunate circumstances, the Department of Ed was not able to give us the answer in the time schedule that they had planned. So that's all I have, and I would be happy to turn things over to Dr. Lane for his portion of the update for us. Thank you.
Thank you for this opportunity. I just wanted to give the board and the public that's here tonight a brief update of some of the work and some observations, and then some considerations that I have for the board as we finish up tonight. Let's see if I can get this. Timeline of the work. I was finishing my time as the executive director of Iowa's AEAs. I was set to retire. It was an interim job, and I was set to retire on June 30th. So on June 20th, the DE invited me in and asked if I would be willing to come over here and work with a new superintendent and also with this board as this school year started, and I agreed. On June 27th, I came over here and I had my first meeting with then interim superintendent TJ Schleckloth and his cabinet folks. I introduced myself over the phone to President Johansson and asked that he meet me for lunch, and we got together out at Grandma's, I think it was, out here in Walcott, and had a nice lunch together. And then on July 22nd, I met Dr. Kabilski for the first time. I'm not sure you were officially on board quite yet, but I met Dr. Kabilski and then spent some time here at my first Davenport board meeting. And since that time, I've spent most of my Mondays with my education partner, Diana Whited-Backer. We've spent most of Mondays here in the district. During that time, I wanted to list several highlights. Certainly for me, and I think for this district, the hiring of your new superintendent has been a highlight. I knew that when I first came over and met with the cabinet that we were going to need you were going to need a dynamic leader, someone who would connect with the community and with employee groups. I was delighted to come over and see his presentation to the teachers on the opening day. Met also with certified staff, and it's symbolic, but I watched the guy roll up his sleeves, tell you he'd purchased a house here in the community, and I thought that was important for this community to know that you had a leader who was going to be with you, not just as your educational leader, but also as a citizen of your community. I've also, during my time here, seen the board the team, the educators here, and the community become accepting of the challenges identified in the Phase 2 report. I've watched people roll up their sleeves and go after these efforts. And I've also been, I've been to your Department of Education board meetings. I've been to the SBRC this last month with Dr. Kabilski. I wanted to talk a little bit about a school climate observation. We heard a comment or two last meeting and one again tonight about some discipline and some behaviors and things. And so I wanted to get a good firsthand look myself. I spent an entire day in one of your high schools about 2-3 weeks ago. And it was not unlike my experience from my high school, where I served as superintendent as recently as 2013. And that's what I wanted to see. I wanted to see kids who were happy. I wanted to see kids who were engaged, kids that were safe, and kids that treated each other respectfully. And that's what I saw. I went through 3 blocks with groups of kids in a group activity. And without a doubt, the highlight for me was in a classroom, I'm going to guess around 20, 22 kids, and they were in a group activity where they were divided into teams and they were in some sort of competition. Clearly, there was one young man, it was a freshman, sophomore class, there was a young man in the back of the room, clear back in the back, and he was strategically placed, so they had a lot of buffer folks between he and the instructor, and he was not with the class that day. He wasn't with the instructor, he wasn't with his classmates. His head was down for part of the time, and he, I remember, I'm an old at-risk coordinator. I've worked with a lot of kids that have had tough days, and this young man wasn't having his best day at school. About a third of the way through the period, a young lady who was 2 rows away came over and repositioned herself in the chair right in front of him. And she engaged him. Now, I'd like to tell you the great story that all of a sudden there was a miracle and this young man blossomed and started participating. He did. He did. But he was engaged. As they had class discussion time, she included him with other students. He was a part of a group. And like I said, I'd like to tell you that he turned it around and was the whiz of the class. He was not. But he was engaged with kids who clearly cared about him, and it was a nice thing to see students caring for other kids. So that was a really good observation for me that day. The other highlight I have up there is the community interest in running for the board. It was fun for me to come over here with my friend Lou Ann Gavist from the Iowa Association of School Boards and host a workshop for prospective board members, and then to see 14 people follow through and do the work that's needed to run for board. That was very impressive. I was here for the forum the other night, and I enjoyed hearing people's responses to the questions. So those are some of the highlights for me. The themes for my time here really come about a lot because of what I've observed, but also what I heard at the forum that night. If I were to add 2 other terms to those things that are those 3 that are up there, they would be transparency and accountability. Those were other big themes, and I'll kind of weave those in a little bit. Fiscal responsibility. I don't know if everybody knows this, I know the board does, but by Iowa law, I heard talks about audits and making sure money's spent how it should be. That's really hard for a school district to fail there. It really is hard. You're mandated by law, as you all know, to have an annual audit. Mine used to take place usually the 2nd week of August, and then later on in the fall, we'd get an auditor's report. And typically what would happen, I had a great business manager and we tried to be compliant, but typically what would happen was if there was anything wrong at all, we had miscoded something, there was no malfeasance of money being misspent or there was nothing about mistrust. It was simple things to fix. And the auditors were there to help us run a better business, and we always took it that way. Your audits, I believe, for about the last 5 years are posted on your website. So if a person ever wanted to get on and look and see what's gone on spending-wise, audit-wise with this district, you can do that right on the district website. Dr. Kabilski spoke to this very, very well. The SBRC, 4 of the 5 members are longtime friends of mine. I have the same kind of respect that President Johansson spoke of for that group. And they want this district to be successful. But their job is fiscal management, fiscal responsibility, and they're going to hold your foot to the fire. And so when you do come up with this great conversation tonight that just finished, but when you do make decisions and submit those, they're going to expect you to honor those. They're going to want you to honor those things. You better have darn good reasons why you don't, or you better be able to, as I think you alluded to, have found some money that we don't have to do this anymore. But the SBRC has big expectations, not just for this district, but for all districts, that when you submit something, that you walk that talk and follow through. You know, it's really symbolic for you all. Before, at the start of every meeting, I listen to President Johansson call on various board members to talk about the vision for the district, the mission statement and those things. But I'm like Dr. Kabilski there too. I want to see more. I want to see more. I've spent so much time on the Department of Education website, on the Mississippi Bend AEA website. I'm guessing I can tell you things about the students in this school district that board members might not even know. I can tell you graduation rates from different years. I can tell you what percentage of your kids tell you you're going to go to college and then actually follow through. I can tell you proficiency scores for the last 10 years. I can tell you the percentage of your kids that are in special ed services compared to the state average. Those are things that you all need to talk about, that you need to have a deeper understanding of, because that helps you make financial decisions and decisions that will really, really serve kids. And I listen to you, sir, talk passionately all the time about every decision should be about kids, and I believe you when you say that. But I think deeper conversations about student achievement, and then I've got student well-being here, boy, that's critical. As I go out, next week I'll be in 3 different AEAs talking to groups of superintendents. Besides student achievement, the number one thing that I will hear about, and they will ask for AEA help on, is student well-being. That if we're not producing children that are happy, that can function out in the world, truthfully, student achievement almost secondary to that. We've got to have kids that can function out in the world, be good husbands and wives, parents and employees. We need to make sure that those things happen. So every opportunity that you get to do workshops yourselves, to visit with your staff, to learn more about Dr. Kabilski's leadership efforts with social emotional learning, those are critical things that I think that you need to think about. And also, take advantage of the Department of Education. They've got a school performance tab that you can go on and you can learn all kinds of neat things about your school district if you've not done that already. So I've come up with 6, I've come up with 6 considerations for the board. The first one is hire Gary Sinclair. Now, Gary Sinclair is a former Iowa superintendent. He's about my age. He was at Dallas Center Grimes. He's a former Iowa Superintendent of the Year. And the reason, I will just tell you, the reason he was an Iowa Superintendent of the Year is that nobody knew and understood school finance better than Gary Sinclair. I mentioned before, I was blessed to have a great business manager. I think I understood school finance pretty well. I would never have thought of certifying a budget without Gary Sinclair taking a look at my product before I published it in the paper and had my board approve it and ultimately sent it to the auditor. He's that good. I'm going to recommend that you hire Gary Sinclair. He works for a business called Forecast 5. You've got your 2-year plan. You're going to have an opportunity to resubmit your 2-year plan for the SBRC. They also require a 5-year plan so that, as I think Dr. Kabilski used the word, and I would agree, it's about sustainability. Is this a plan that's manageable, that you can work over time? With Gary's Forecast 5, he will work with your board. He will work with the community so that you have a deeper understanding of the advantages you have here, and you have some, and the challenges that you face. He will build a schedule for you that forecasts student enrollment. It will include open enrollment. It will include birth rate. It will include migration into your district. He will look at the last 5 years and then project out 5 years into the future what you can expect to happen. He'll do the same thing with buildings. If you have to have an elementary school that's re-roofed 2 years from now and you know that, he'll build it into your plan. Can your management levy handle that? Do you need to pay for it with Save Fund? Does your PEPAL take care of that? He will do all of those things for you so that this district has a plan, not just for teaching and learning, but for finance, for facilities, for technology, everything that a district needs. Now, he doesn't leave you after that year of giving you a 5-year plan. He will come back to this board every single year and sit down with you. Here's what we said was going to happen this year. Now we know what really did happen. Let's plug those new numbers in, and he'll project it out another year for you. So I can't imagine running a school district without this service. I did it in my own district of about 2,000 students as I retired. I did an interim job in a small district of 400 that was in huge financial trouble. We employed Gary Sinclair. He's not a doctor, I guess, but Gary Sinclair. The district's doing very, very well now 3 years later, because of good planning, management by the board in partnership with Gary. So I'm going to recommend, and I know you've had the conversations already, Dr. Gabilski has, but I'm going to recommend that the district engage Gary Sinclair. The second one I have, I would ask that beginning November 25th, when you seat your new board, that one of the considerations is that you suspend your committee of the whole for at least 3 months and dedicate that time instead to bring in an Iowa Association of School Board facilitator in here. You're going to have at least 2 new members. You're going to have a new leader of your board. And I think it's going to be critical that the board engages with IASB on board leadership, on board functioning with a new superintendent. We sat here at the last committee of the whole meeting that I was at, and I think the topic was merit pay for central office staff predominantly. And one of the things I remember sharing with you, and I don't remember the exact context, you show me a district that functions very, very well, a high-flying school district, and I will show you a school board and superintendent partnership. I would encourage all of you, get to know this gentleman as well as you can. I would encourage any of the new board members that as you come on, get to know your superintendent, become partners. Doesn't mean you always have to agree, but become trusted partners. We talked about this before. You need regular presentations to this board from staff, from your superintendent. Share things when you've gone to workshops. Talk about student achievement, talk about well-being, and talk about the behavior challenges that your administrators and teachers face. The last 3, Diane in particular, spent a lot of time with HR staff, and we'd like to recommend that you do some reorganization. And one of the things that I've observed, one of those big shocks for me when I was at that first school board meeting in July, was to watch you all through a consent agenda approve the release of counselors, special ed teachers, and some science teachers. and that was a surprise to me. We would have never done that in my district. And I realize there's different contractual obligations sometimes. We would have never done that. Because as this gentleman says, that would not have been in the best interest of our students. If I'd have done that, I would have known that we would have started the school year, and you did here too, to some extent, without adequate teaching staff to serve our kids as that year started. I wouldn't have released people. So I don't know if it's policy issues, I don't know if it's procedure issues, but I'd recommend that you really work with Dr. Goldstone back here and your HR staff, and she and I spoke about this morning. There are some things that you can do better. I think your hiring practices can get better, and I won't go into great detail, but I think sometimes there's a disconnect between the HR office and the building level people doing the hiring. I'm not sure that the background check always gets done to everybody's satisfaction or in a timely fashion. So I just ask you to talk about some of the HR procedures that you have. Do those really serve student interests? SIAC up there, that stands for School Improvement Advisory Committee, and school districts are required by law to have those in place. The last time I can find that you had one of those was clear back last February. And that group is charged with learning all kinds of things about your school. We held them quarterly in my district, and one meeting we might have more of an elementary reading focus for the committee. The next time it might be about accelerated courses at the high school. It could be about the fine art. We just really tried to educate a group of our public about our school work. I mentioned before that you've got 14 people running for 4 seats. You're going to have some people who don't get elected to this board. Those would be the first people, Dr. Kabilski, that I would call and say, thank you so much. Would you be willing to serve on our School Improvement Advisory Committee? And students are on that committee too, by the way. It's important to have students' voices on there. So we found, again, in my home district, that oftentimes people who served on that committee 2, 3, 4 years, boy, they made great board members the next time elections came up. They had a deeper understanding of our work. They had a good connection to the school. They'd made some connections. They knew the administrators. And I really think that you need to reinvigorate this School Improvement Advisory Group and get started again on that work. The last thing I would ask that you do, and I've just met this gentleman back here one time, really talked a couple times, but I think you really need to, I heard you, Mr. Director, goes to talk about marketing the district at the forum the other night. And I think that's a critical thing, that districts tell their message, that they tell their story, they own their challenges, and they celebrate their successes. And I think that you need to really engage your new communications team to make sure that you are telling the story, not just to students, not just to staff, not just to parents, but to the greater community. One of your candidates the other night, and you got that statistic from me, was that he told you that 80% of the people in this district that pay taxes have no child connected to this school. So you need to tell your story to the entire community to make sure people are supportive of the work that you're doing. And then finally, it's so easy to focus on the negative. You know, I've gotten to know Megan Valley, who's your education reporter here, and I like Megan. But we had a conversation that it's so much easier to write negative stories than it is positive ones. It just is. And in all honesty, you know what she owned? They sell better. Mm-hmm. They sell better. They look at clicks on their stories, and negative stories get umpteen the clicks compared to what something positive. My wife was on your Facebook page, and she told me the band story that you all shared. She told me about the University of Iowa band being here. She saw that on your Facebook page. But not everybody looks at that. But if there's a negative story about the school, or about the city, or a city employee, or a teacher who gets jammed up, that's a story. That's news. You need to make sure that in any way possible, you share the strengths of this district, because you have so many. Most people will never, ever get to experience what I saw that young lady do for a classmate that day. She didn't know I was watching her. That was a great story. I'll remember that a long, long time. I hope you do, because that's how we want our students to treat each other. I heard at the forum the other night, aside from those themes that were up there earlier, I heard people who were proud of this district. They talked about being a graduate of this district. They talked about their children going to school here. They talked about working here their whole career. They were proud of this place. But the other theme I heard was, we can be better. We can be better. So I would encourage board members, this community, to partner with your new superintendent, with your staff here, do everything you can to be the absolute best you can. You know, I didn't invent this saying, but I had a great friend who used to tell me, the child only has 1 year in second grade, or 1 year in seventh grade. We need to make it a dandy. We need to make it a dandy. So I would finally conclude with, seize this opportunity. The state reached out to me to come in here, and I think I've been some help. I think I can be more. But this has enriched my life as much as I've probably done anything for this place. Take these opportunities to learn, to grow, get better as a board, as a school community, and I just think you have a great future. I have the highest hopes for this place. I do. You have great days ahead of you. So I will stop with that, but I would hope the board would consider some of those suggestions or considerations as we move forward. And with that, again, I want to thank you for the opportunity you've given me here to be here, and I'd answer any questions if you have any.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Lane. I'm sure there'll be some discussion, and you don't mind standing up there for a little longer.
No, I'm fine.
Okay, great. Any discussion? Questions, comments? Director Beck.
Two things. Number one, we did used to have presentations, and I think they kind of fell by the wayside when we had a lot of other stuff going on. And so I am really glad to hear that Dr. Kabilski and Dr. Lane, that you recommend bringing those back, because they were celebrations of joys, but they were also really helpful because we got to hear about programs that were working well. And I think the one thing I always asked was, okay, that's working really well. Why don't we see it in all of our schools? But, things got kind of crazy and we didn't have consistent leadership for a while. And the other thing is the School Improvement Advisory Commission. We've had one since I've been on the board, but as you said, they haven't met in a while. And I think only once have I seen sort of a list of suggestions. And so I'm happy to see that back on sort of the radar again, because I think it's important that we hear from the community in an advisory capacity, and we haven't been lately. So I'd also like to thank you for spending time with our district and being willing to spend more time with our district and offer your expertise. I think it's important, and appreciate it.
Thank you.
Anything else? Director Gosa.
Yeah, I thank you for your presentation and your suggestions too. My only thing was you were talking about hiring this outside person. I'm just, whoever presents that to us, I hope you have somewhere that money's coming from, and we don't have to cut anybody for it.
I understand.
Okay.
One of the things he will pay for himself times over. He will help you make decisions. He will help you make decisions about how you levy in certain ways, or how you juggle levies from year to year to keep your tax base where you'd like it to be. He'll just make wonderful suggestions to you that allow you to make for more thoughtful planning. I'm not going to tell you that it's free service, but he will pay for himself.
Okay. Yeah, that's my only hang up on it.
I understand.
Especially when we just talked about.
Sure. No, I understand
it's
that.
all about the dollars, so.
Absolutely understand.
I would hate that put out there that we cut something else to, and I do understand that.
I think Dr. Kabilski perhaps has him coming up for an upcoming agenda, perhaps. I'm excited for you all to get to hear. I'm excited for the folks that come to these things to get to hear the things he can do for you.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Student board members? It's about the end of the evening. Go ahead, Lauren.
I'd be disappointed if you didn't ask me something.
I don't really have any questions. I was going to thank you I think you advocated for students really well. I did have the same concern as Mr. Gosa, but I did like the way that you advocated for students. So
Good,
I just wanted to thank you, I guess.
It was my whole career. I've been doing this for I'm in my 45th year, and I would not have changed my life one bit. This is what I wanted to do, and it's been a fulfilling life for me. So thank you for saying that. Thank you very much.
Oh, I haven't spoken yet.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
You better get
God
chair.
forbid we leave without Ralph asking a question.
It may not be so much a question as a comment. So in the agenda, 9.02 is listed as Phase 2 update, which is something that the board has asked that we get a Phase 2 update at every meeting. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And then your report is Davenport CSD report. And I really appreciate everything that you have said and recommended. the one thing that I wanted to express was that going through the phase one issues, and trying to, we had an April 23rd of 2018 deadline. And I would say that that date is indelibly written into my brain. And at every meeting, we said, well, what's going on? What's going on? What's going on? And we had updates, and it was nip and tuck. Well, we should get here. We'll probably get here. We should make that 23rd deadline. And that word should came up frequently. And although I will not be on the board in the near future, and so my comments may be unimportant, but the only thing I was going to say is that it's very, very difficult when going through something like that, and as the board, you're held responsible, not just accountable, but responsible by state organizations for making sure that you get this done by April 23rd. It wasn't just the district having to do it. It was the board that was responsible for that. And it was the board that took the hit for if there were anything not completed, and it was the president in specific that got really hammered hard. The reason I mention all that is that if it were possible, and we've talked about when we started the phase two review and the board said, hey, we need an update at every meeting. We had a form that had red, green, and yellow on it that had a lot of responsibilities. My concern going forward, which is one of your comments, you talked about moving forward, and I would just hope that somehow, whether it's the department, whether it's our administration, whether it's our board, I don't know where to do it, but my sense is that if I'm going to be held responsible for those specific issues and specific dates, then I would need more specific information on where are we going, when is this due, that due, things like that. And I don't know what your thoughts might be on that. I'll make that recommendation to the board and to the administration. But do you have any thoughts on the board responsibility to the phase two completion and making sure that the board is responsible? Because you've talked about a lot of other things here that are important, student achievement, all these other things, the 6 recommendations that you had. And as I'm thinking about this, I'm going, well, this is pretty dry stuff, trying to make sure we're compliant with what the state is demanding. And maybe I just take that too seriously. I don't know, but I'm curious your thoughts.
Well, I don't think you can take it too seriously, President Johansson. I'm glad you do take it seriously. My role here is different than almost anybody else's. I don't work for the DE. I had no input at all into your phase 1 or phase 2 report. My job, I see it as somewhat as a liaison between the DE and you folks to help a gentleman from out of state come in here and get him assimilated into the role of Iowa superintendent, get him connected with some of the decision makers that he'll deal with at state level, and I think he would tell you we've done that. And so those are the things I've tried to do. I've tried to really be a good listener at board meetings and get to know you as individuals and what your priorities are and what your beliefs are. And I've said this to a lot of people, and I said this the other night at our legislative forum. I believe you all came on here to serve and to be the greatest caretakers of children you can possibly be. Now, doesn't mean you all agree all the time or you see things the same way, but I think that's what you're here for. So I have nothing but respect and I honor school boards and school employees, whether you're a secretary, a cook, a superintendent, I don't care. I love those people. I listened carefully to what you said, and I'm gonna be with Amy Williamson at the DE this Friday afternoon, and I'm gonna convey that to you. I think Dr. Kabilski, whenever he gets updates, he shares those. He shares those. I think you're still waiting on a chart that I've heard you talk about months ago that you'd like to have, and I'll bring that up again. But you do have some dates coming up. I think the most recent, newest one coming up is a special ed plan that we got signed off on just today. There was a little extension and there were some extenuating circumstances, but I've heard about that for 2 months or 2 weeks. I have nothing to do with it, but Sandy back here, she's gone now, I guess, but we've tried to crank that out a little bit quicker. And we're going to push for some of these some of these experts that are supposed to be here for PBIS and for some other things. We're going to really push this week. Let's get those things here because we promised those to you all. So I listened to what you said, and I'm going to convey that message back to the State Department of Education.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
I'm assuming that that's it. There's no other conversation? Okay, thank you very
Thank
much,
you.
Dr. Lane. That concludes our discussion items. Are there any administrative reports?
No, sir.
I do have 3 board requests. First is from Director Beck. Today's date, agenda item. I would like to implement Dr. Lane's 6 recommendations for the DCSD as long as they are financially feasible. Why are you requesting this agenda item? We have Dr. Lane for a reason. He knows what he is doing and we should listen to him. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. And when would you like this agenda item ASAP? Next is from Director Gosa. Today's date, agenda item, description of the request, have the policy committee look at school visitor policy. Why are you requesting this information or agenda item? As was brought up tonight during open forum, that a student was removed from a school by someone not on the visitors list. Is there a second?
Second.
When would you like this agenda item? As soon as possible. Third request from Director Beck, agenda item. I'd like to put discipline policy back on the policy committee agenda. Why are you requesting this agenda item? We need to update this to reflect the philosophy of the district as we have changed some procedures. Is there a second?
Second.
And when would you like this agenda item? Next policy committee meeting, which is 11/6 of 19. Thank you very much. Let's see. That's about it. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
This meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.